Okay, so recently I've been looking at the upcoming games that I'm anticipating, and I've been breaking them down or going over dev insights or dev interviews or founder Q&A videos or whatever it is, gameplay showcases. And since I already did this style of video with one upcoming sci-fi RPG in the Expanse Osiris Reborn, I figured I'd do it with the other sci-fi RPG I'm anticipating, which is Exodus. And I gotta say, I've really been enjoying the style of videos I've been making recently because it gives me a reason to dive deeper into what the developers have actually been doing and to go over, Q&As and dev insights, dev interviews, gameplay showcases, and really break them down to see what the games are actually like. Outside of, like the big cinematic trailer that we all watch, it doesn't really tell us a whole lot about what the game actually is. So yeah, as always, that's what I'm going to do today, and I'm going to start with the developer's history. And the developer behind Exodus is Archetype Entertainment. The studio was created in 2019, sort of as a subsidiary to Wizards of the Coast, which is a further subsidiary of Hasbro. And they were created basically to diversify the portfolio of Wizards of the Coast, which basically consists of, the Dungeons and Dragons IP and Magic the Gathering. And seeing as they licensed their IP to adjacent RPG studios such as like Larian, to me, it comes as no surprise that they wanted their studio to be led by like some senior talent on previous RPG games and ones that they have greenlit in the past. And that's where James Olin comes in, who is the studio head at Archetype. And he was once senior creative director over at Bioware when they were making Baldur's Gates 1 and 2, as well as Dragon Age Origins. He's also known for his creative work on the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic franchise as a whole. So that would include like the games as well as the comic books. He's also done D&D adventure books as well. Like, this guy, to me, he seriously has every creative bag in his arsenal. It's insane. So to me, it only makes sense that such an experienced and decorated dev like James was given the studio lead position, also considering like the massive success and the critical acclaim of the games that he's worked on in the past. But it doesn't stop there. There's more previous Bioware devs that are working on Exodus, which includes Chris King, who is the game director on Exodus. And he also worked on Mass Effect as well, and he worked at 343, and he worked on Halo 4 and 5 over there, as well as ex-Bioware studio head Chad Robertson, who was there for basically almost like a decade. And Chad Robertson and James Olin, they're often in these founder Q&As, and they're usually the ones that are answering a lot of the questions in the community. But outside of those ex-Bioware devs, there's just a lot of talent working on this team. Like, there's ex-Call of Duty devs, ex-Respawn devs, EA devs. Like, despite what you might think of these companies like Activision and EA and Respawn, like, the developers who work on those games, they're incredibly talented. There's no doubt about that. Now, this core team has been working on Exodus for about 7 years at this point, which it is unfortunately just like the standard AAA games at this point. But there's two important distinctions to make about this situation. Firstly, this is a new studio with a new IP, which means setting the framework for what the universe or like the setting or the themes is going to be like, and starting that from pre-production is going to take a lot longer than a game that has a sequel or already an established IP, or even the same universe that the game takes place in, like Wizards of the Coast and Baldur's Gate. So setting the rules for the game world and doing the world building and setting certain limitations on what's going to be possible in the game and what's not going to be possible is just going to take a lot longer because you have to flesh those things out, again, compared to an IP that already exists. And secondly, they haven't just been sitting around doing the bare minimum for 7 years, going on 8 at this point. Like I said, the studio head has written books in the Dungeons and Dragons universe in the past, and that has given him and his team an understanding of how to shape a game's lore from scratch. And as of January 2024, the studio collaborated with Random House Worlds to make books on Exodus before the game's release with famous author Peter Hamilton. Also, something else they've been working on is an Expanse the Expanse, Exodus. I'm sci-fi brain fried right now. But they've been working on an Exodus tabletop RPG game, and they now have pre-orders up on their website if you're interested. And to me, at least, all of this is a positive. Like, when I was just getting into sci-fi after coming off of reading about a dozen dark fantasy books in a row, I was looking into sci-fi books that were also sort of like games, and I came across The Expanse, which already was a Telltale game, but people mainly knew it for its like TV show and books, as well as the upcoming game The Expanse Osiris Reborn. And I read the first 5 books of The Expanse, instantly loved the series, and personally, at least to me, a game with a lot of lore behind it before it even releases ends up being like 10 times better, because I already have pre-exposure to like the world and the lore. And even if the series like wasn't the best, I still have like that prior knowledge. Is one of the things I love most about book to game adaptations. I'll give an example of how this has worked in the past for me. I read The Witcher books front to back twice before I even played The Witcher 3. One of my favorite games of all time. It's number 2. Like, I vaguely heard of The Witcher 3 before I read The Witcher books, but I wanted to read the books anyways, so I read all the books, then I hopped into the game, and having all this knowledge before getting into the game, it just made it like the payoff of, me already knowing a lot of these characters from the books. and then watching the story play out, this already incredible in and of itself. It like the payoff was 10 times better in my opinion. Still though, I know this won't apply to the vast majority of people, and they're still gonna hate the fact that games take like over 8 years to release when all said and done. But to me, I'd rather have a world that's fleshed out with pre-established lore to latch onto than needing to read all like the in-game glossary every 2 minutes so that I have an understanding of the world, at least for RPG games. Now, as for Exodus and what it's broadly about, we play as a traveler, and travelers, they're basically like humans' last elite force in this world, and we play as a traveler known as June Aslan, who is unique because they have the ability to possess celestial tech and harness its power. And we're going to be occupying a region called the Centauri Cluster as we look to recover some advanced alien technology that can help cure the rot on terraforming planets for humans. A key point to this world that you're going to constantly hear is that humans are very much dominant once again, and the most dominant race is going to be the Celestials. They're actually shown multiple times in the trailer, but you can quite clearly see that Celestials hold positions of like political power and are more mentally capable, as well as just being more physically capable and advanced than humans. And to be honest, some of these Celestials, they give me like this Mass Effect vibe, like the Maruyama. It has this Reaper vibe because they're this titanic living space structure that they're constantly hunting down human ships. And you can just tell it literally looks like a Reaper ship. Like if you were to put like a blur over the screen, it would look identical to a Reaper ship. I'm not saying they were copied from Mass Effect, but like they really do give this vibe of like this really big insurmountable obstacle that humans have to overcome, which is great for a story to start with that, like this like existential dread of a very looming threat that can basically strike you down at any time if they really feel like it. Also, just to note here, since I'm talking about humans and Celestials, they're not the only two races at war here. Like there are other races as well as other modified races from what we can call the Awakened. But yeah, again, like this very much gives me like Mass Effect vibes. Like the Celestials, they're a modified human race that are just much more advanced than humans from thousands of years with advanced technology. So a lot of them are very different from each other. A lot of the Celestials, they're almost different races in themselves. But to get away from the narrative for a second, I feel like that this game's time dilation mechanic is going to have a huge impact. It seems like your choices throughout the story will have an impact on the universe as a whole, but it's going to be much faster than you can process it. If you make a very important decision on one of the explorable worlds, then you come back to that world later, it'll probably show massive differences since the last time that you were there, and possibly even like structural changes or restrictions that go along with your story consequences. Now, I'm sure there's going to be someone somewhere saying, oh, that's unrealistic. What do you mean you can time warp and time travel basically, whatever, despite this basically being a space opera RPG like Mass Effect. But after watching all of the trailers, it looks like this game is going to take its world very seriously and make you make the toughest decisions that's going to shape how the survival of the human race works. So I couldn't care less about how unrealistic or ridiculous it might sound in terms of like the story. If I'm playing a really badass character like, you know, Shepard from Mass Effect, right? And I'm saving the entire galaxy, like genuinely I feel like who gives a shit if the story is unrealistic or not, or maybe the fact that it's so far past your suspension of disbelief that you just can't take the story seriously. At the end of the day, it's a video game, and what you experience in the video game, do you love it? Like, is it really badass? Is there sick moments in the story? Is there incredible plot beats? That's all I really care about, right? There's some amazing side companions. Like, that's what you should be caring about, not if this is grounded in realism or not. I really couldn't care less about that. Now, switching over to the combat, I will say that they're going to have a much more detailed gameplay showcase this summer. So this is mostly going to be kind of surface level based off of what we've already been shown. But we have been shown that there's things like a laser 3-round burst rifle called the Repeater, which is described as like a rapid fire rifle effective at medium ranges. Then obviously we see a sharpshooter described weapon as a, you know, a high damage long range precision rifle, as well as a shredder, which is good at close ranges. And to me, it looks like it has some sort of modifier for breaking light shields. I'm not really too sure. But something I think a lot of people might have missed from the combat showcase is that if you can see right there with a little D-pad indicator, I'm almost 100% certain that means we can switch off from one character to another, which would basically make the combat a lot more versatile if you want to swap characters to whatever character suits the best situation in combat encounters. In another gameplay clip, they show how we'll be using squad commands in combat, but I actually focused on something else this time as well. I noticed how like this enemy right here has a nameplate, and the rest of the enemies, they just have the regular health bar. This encounter probably has multiple ways to play out, whether you can do it by being a pacifist and, you know, just like talking to the NPC, or an earlier encounter that led to this confrontation. Either way, I don't see why they would name this NPC if it's just supposed to be a random NPC, because it doesn't look like it's much harder to kill than the other grunt enemies around it. In terms of the celestial abilities, I'm pretty sure we've only seen one of them so far, which is Erupt. It's the one where you can remove the obstacles by basically pounding the ground, but you can also create bridges and stuff like that. So like, it does seem like some sort of two-sided ability. I'm unsure if this next one is a celestial ability, but it kind of looks like it, but I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to say it definitely is. But it's this sort of like explosive spear attack ability that explodes second after impact. So yeah, either way, there looks to be some really cool celestial abilities, or maybe just like regular abilities. I'm not really too sure what the spear attack ability is, but it still looks really cool as well. And lastly, in terms of combat, when we're focusing on stealth, like, I don't care too much about stealth, at least until I play a good 2 to 3 playthroughs, playing with as much as I can in terms of like the action combat. Like, it's going to take me at least, honestly, like 3 playthroughs. Also, I hope that they don't force like these stealth sections, because that would really suck. I'm not saying that the stealth looks bad or anything, but it's definitely not going to be the reason me or basically anyone else is going to be playing this game. Let's be real. Also, briefly, since I keep mentioning it, I want to discuss the founder Q&A videos and blog posts that they're doing. I just want to say, like, there's a lot of these. There's 6 of them in total. But to me, I'll go over some of the most important questions and answers from these Q&As. I'll leave links in the description if you want to check them out yourself, because there's a lot of really good information in them. Honestly, sometimes, I'm not going to lie, they do have this tendency of saying a whole lot without actually answering the question. Like, a couple of questions, I'm like, you didn't really answer the question. Like, you didn't answer it at all, honestly. But the first one I have here is from James Olin himself, explaining when he's stuck on like a story concept or an idea, he often asks other writers, and also how he's talked about how other writers have contributed to the actual world building on Exodus. This is something that's like, it's really important to me, because we see a lot of these like lead writers or creative directors that basically have full control over a story and its direction, and they like to play like dictator on how a story is and how it's going to play out. But to me, it leads to some like woefully disastrous stories that are written by people that live in this like bubble of basically just like yes men, of people who are just agreeing with them, where criticism isn't really allowed, and they think that the story is great when it really isn't. And that feedback could have made the game a lot better, and it could have helped them out. The second thing I have here is the games that inspired them while making Exodus. And to me, I will never get tired of hearing developers' inspirations. It gives me sort of like a peek into like their thought process of what kind of games certain developers wanted to make. But outside of the obvious inspirations like, you know, Mass Effect or whatever, they actually mentioned games like Horizon, so like Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West. And this, to me, it came out of left field. Like, when I heard this, like the combat was inspired by that, I was like, what? But it started to make sense to me, because when I really look at like the elemental design of combat and how every structure of these celestials sort of looks like it could fit in the Horizon universe if tweaked, I was like, okay, I get it, right? Horizon are not some of my favorite games, but they do have really good combat. So yeah, I'm not too mad about that. Another game one of the devs mentioned was Metroid Prime. And to be specific, they stated that the exploration of Metroid Prime was a driving motivator. Now, the third and final Q&A topic I'm going to discuss is how they mentioned that the time dilation mechanic would actually not only impact the story and characters, but the outcomes of the game, which to me was a really interesting way to say that there's possibly going to be multiple endings that would depend on your choices in the story. No one is really talking about Exodus yet, at least, because I mean, it's so far out, like, and it doesn't really have a release date outside of, I think they said they're aiming for spring 2027. I can't be sure. I only know for sure that they said they're aiming for early 2027. I've been seeing a lot of people say that they're actually more excited for the Expanse, but to me, they both look great. I'm going to be honest, I hate how we constantly have to pit games against each other nowadays. That's also why I hate these like little lame ass comparison videos that you constantly find. I don't understand, like, why can't we just be happy that after Bioware has royally screwed up for the past decade, now we're getting sci-fi games out the ass and they all look really fun? Like, I mean, Ceros and Aphelion just released recently in like the past month, and they're both great games. We're getting Judas at some point later this year, at least we think. And early next year, we're getting both the Expanse, Osiris Reborn, and Exodus. Like, to me, if anyone can pull off a space opera sci-fi with a great narrative, excellent companions, and at least serviceable gameplay, Like, I'm pretty sure the creators of, or at least some of the workers on Mass Effect can do it. But again, that's just my thoughts and my breakdown on Exodus. And as always, leave your thoughts on Exodus in the comments below. 2026 is looking to be a really stacked year. And because of where GTA 6, at least for now, is sitting, I'm almost certain that the early 2027 part of the year is going to be really stacked as well. And this is one of those games I'm excited for. But yeah, anyways, that's it for me. I'll see you next time.